Isn't it just beautiful when we see a glow up happen right in front of our own eyes? And perhaps nothing is more wholesome to see than a superstar go through their own glow up. So that's what I'm going to be discussing in today's video, ranking 4 glow ups from the past and the current roster. And a heads up, the last one is definitely going to be a wild card. You probably won't see it coming. Now I have to preface this by saying we've had a multitude of different glow ups throughout the last couple of decades within the world of the WWE. So I thought it'd be best, before I get into my list of my top 4, I'll give some honorable mentions. These honorable mentions are almost mandatory because I feel like if I make this video and I don't include these names, people are going to come at me like, mate, how did you miss out the most obvious glow ups? But that's exactly the point. I didn't want to include the most obvious ones. So that's people like Roman Reigns. So his transition from the big dog to the tribal chief. Drew McIntyre from the chosen one, 3MB, to going on the indies and coming back and becoming a bona fide superstar. And of course, probably the most obvious one, Cody Rhodes. Going from dashing Cody Rhodes to Stardust, going and helping setting up a brand new company in AEW, making a name for himself, and then of course coming to the WWE where he is arguably the face of the company. So of course those are obvious mentions. So now that I've got them out of the way, I'm going to go into my list. And again, the first 3 I'll say have been mentioned quite a few times. The last one, I don't see that much being said about this individual. So let's get stuck into it. So with number 1, we're starting off with CM Punk. Now, CM Punk debuted in the summer of 2006, precisely in ECW. Now, this man had a very solid background in indie wrestling, namely Ring of Honor. He had really cemented himself as a household name within that company. So when he moved over to, I think it was OVW momentarily, he came into the eyes of Paul Heyman, who, to be honest with you, I think Paul Heyman is probably one of the main reasons why CM Punk is where he's at, why he even made it past the initial stage of developmental, which obviously back then before NXT was OVW, moved into ECW, as I mentioned, in the summer of 2006. Definitely had a decent stint in there. That's when we really started to see him take off in many ways. And we saw the company really take a gamble on CM Punk in 2008, where he won his Money in the Bank, his first Money in the Bank briefcase, where he later successfully cashed in the briefcase to become World Heavyweight Champion. Now, his first reign was a mere 69 days. And throughout history, we've had these champions where, although they've been world champion, they haven't felt like the world champion. They felt like a placeholder champion, a paper champion, someone who's there just to fill a spot in between perhaps storylines or in between the return of a bigger superstar, anything along those lines. And this first reign of CM Punk, although he was world championship material, he just did not feel like it. And again, it was a very short reign. Fast forward to the following year, he wins back-to-back Money in the Bank briefcases, making history at the time, and then successfully cashes in again to become world champion. Now, this second reign, there's a lot more that can be said for it, because this was the birth of the perhaps one of the most underrated feuds of all time, in Jeff Hardy versus CM Punk, and that feud worked so well when it did, simply because they were completely opposite personalities and people and souls, or whatever you want to call it, because you've got one guy here who screams about not touching drugs, alcohol, or anything like that, and then you got the other guy who's a daredevil, and of course, you know, he's had documented problems with substances and alcohol and stuff like that. So there was a sense of realism in this feud which worked so well, and it gave CM Punk the ability to transition into being a heel, I believe for the first time since he debuted in the WWE. There was of course a back and forth with a title change between Jeff Hardy and CM Punk in the year of 2009, I believe it was. Although a much better reign than his first reign the year before, still again just felt like a placeholder to a certain degree. And it always felt like the company was just not too comfortable, not too sure in fully pulling the trigger on CM Punk. Now, namely a Vince McMahon, I can imagine a guy who looks like CM Punk, you know, tattooed up and stuff, and saying he's straight edge and everything like that, you know, doesn't work for me, pal. Apparently he had some sort of issues with Triple H, which I think became more prominent in the 2010s, early 2010s. I'll get into that in a second. My point is, the early stint of CM Punk's career in the late 2000s was on paper, there's no way of denying it, solid, very solid. He won multiple world championships. He won back-to-back Money in the Bank briefcases, both at WrestleMania, I might add. So he was definitely pushed in the right direction. And just going through this is kind of making me think of, damn, was CM Punk sometimes ungrateful? Like, back then, we always were sort of saying, oh, they don't select me and stuff. Yeah, sure, they didn't make him the guy. However, they really did give him opportunities where he was able to, literally, pun intended, cash in on and become some sort of main eventer with the world titles. And as we came out of the feud with Jeff Hardy for the world title, he went into a program with The Undertaker and eventually transitioning into the whole straight edge society, which, to be honest with you, was an interesting gimmick. It definitely worked. Again, where did they put him in the pecking order? Not really that high. Probably high upper mid card, but like, that's max, I wouldn't put him on the main event scene at all. Then we fast forward to 2011. Now 2011, during this whole time, professional wrestling, it really had its ups and downs, and I want to highlight the downs because I remember watching wrestling at this time, specifically the WWE, of course, and I thought 2010 was a bit meh, 2011 was meh. We had some, great TV as well in 2011, namely SmackDown's Randy Orton and Christian program was solid for the world title. Like, I think that really gave Christian his time to come out. But really where things changed for CM Punk was the summer of Punk in 2011. Namely, of course, the pipe bomb that he delivered to John Cena sitting on the ramp, which is still one of the most iconic things in professional wrestling history. That really put CM Punk on the map because we always knew he could deliver on the mic, and he was pretty solid in the ring as well with all his indie background, and he's been doing this thing for a long time. And he was going up against the traditional babyface in John Cena, who at this point John Cena was certified 50-50. When I mean 50-50, I mean his reception with the crowd. This was Let's Go Cena, Cena sucks, So when John Cena came out, there was thunderous boos at the same time as thunderous cheers. So putting him against the likes of a CM Punk, who's this anti-hero who says things as they need to be, who's not the typical prototype for the company. He's not built like one, he doesn't move like one, he doesn't talk like one. All the stuff that's been done a lot now recently, but back then it was sort of more nuanced, it was new. And of course we got the iconic Money in the Bank match with John Cena where he threatened to leave the company with a championship, which in kayfabe he did, and he returned with a whole new entrance theme and Cult of Personality. I still don't know if I like his old theme more. Now, of course, Cult of Personality is objectively a very good song. However, the Fire Burns from, I think, Kill Switch Engage just had that entrance, Money in the Bank 2011, when he comes out in Chicago with the Fire Burns, is one of the most goosebump-inducing pieces of media content that you can ever consume. I mean, I say that even now. Like, if you go back and watch it, you're like, damn, that was some good shit, And then eventually holding the championship for a record 434 days, I think it was. Paul Heyman was included into this angle at one point. You had Triple H coming to it. I think Kevin Nash as well. There was a lot of moving parts, and this really, really, really felt like, CM Punk is finally a main event top guy, and this was the pinnacle of his glow up. So much so where only a couple of years after that, he of course left the company, I think in early 2014, and for a decade we had fans sadly go ahead and ruin some other wrestler's moment in the ring and chant CM Punk. Now, I'm not going to sit there and say I didn't want CM Punk back. Of course I did. Sometimes I found it a bit annoying and a bit stupid, like we're chanting CM Punk at the most random times. Of course, when it was against a certain opponent, sure, makes sense. But this would be 4 or 5 years down the line. It'll be a random moment on Raw, which has nothing to do with CM Punk. No callbacks, no history, nothing, and you're just hearing CM Punk chants. So although strange and sometimes stupid, it just goes to show the power that man had. And I would argue it all happened in his glow-up phase from 2011 onwards. Next up, we're moving over to Jeff Hardy, who I briefly touched on in CM Punk's career in the WWE. Now, Jeff Hardy's an interesting one. My boy came into the WWE back in, I think, the late 90s with his brother Matt Hardy. Now, from what I know, he was underage. Now, he just blatantly well, I'm not sure if it was him. I think it was the WWE that just said, you know what, we'll just kind of brush past the age and just make something else up. So all I know is he was underage, and I think he was legally below the age where he could actually wrestle. Just like with everything else with Jeff Hardy, it has to be unconventional. So this underage kid comes in with his brother Matt, and you know, initially they're jobbers, but then they start tearing up the tag team scene, and then you include the Edge and Christians, the Dudleys, and they put on the whole TLC match concept onto the map. I think their first extreme top tier tag team match was in 1999. 2000 they did some tremendous work, and of course WrestleMania 17, 2001, the iconic moment where Jeff himself gets speared by Edge whilst holding the championship. And I think that is one of the moments in professional wrestling history that can be shown to anyone and they'll recall it, even if they've never been a wrestling fan. It's like, it's such a memorable, iconic moment. Again, I wasn't watching wrestling at the time then, but it feels like I can remember the time I saw this because it's plastered everywhere. Of course, in recent tag team matches, namely Street Profits and everything that's going on SmackDown, they tried recreating that not too long ago. Still an awesome spot, but nowhere near as legendary, as emphatic as the OG version back in 01. So my point is, Jeff Hardy was a certified tag team player, and being more of the daredevil out of the two, him and Matt Hardy, and also the younger one, it felt like perhaps initially Matt was the more frontline communicator. Perhaps he was the one delivering more of the promos. Perhaps he could be the one that goes into like a world title reign or anything like that. Speculations, of course, back then. But Jeff Hardy still had his cult-like following. Like, he was the one out of all these 6 members, so Dudley's, Edge, Christian, and Hardy's, where, okay, now when the camera pans onto just Jeff Hardy out of these 6, this is when the match goes from here to here. Like, someone is getting flatlined. Someone's ribs are getting crushed. Someone's gonna get hurt. And before I go into further details about this, Jeff has to be one of the luckiest, touch wood. I mean, God bless him, you know, I'm happy he's still able to walk around and be fit and healthy, but is that boy lucky or what? Because if you really think about it, he's put himself through arguably more than anyone. Like, you know, obviously Edge of course had to retire early in 2011 because of his neck. He was involved in some hellacious matchups, but I'd probably argue no one's been in more fucked up matches than Jeff Hardy, and especially what he's done. Hey, the big man upstairs loves him, and I'm happy to know that, because we all us wrestling fans love Jeff Hardy. As we transition out of the Attitude Era, Jeff Hardy then decides to go to TNA, where he had an interesting little stint there. You know, he faced the likes of AJ Styles, Jeff Jarrett, Abyss, just to name a few. And then fast forward, he decides to come back to the WWE about 2 years later in the year of 2006. Now, this was an exciting time. I vividly remember watching wrestling at this time. And he came back and he joined forces with his brother, which was cool to see. And he also had a reign with the IC title. I remember this very vivid steel cage match. It was Johnny Nitro, aka John Morrison, back then Johnny Nitro, part of Eminem, and he went one-on-one with Jeff Hardy for the IC title. And speaking of Eminem, that, I think it was the ladder match where Joey Mercury got his face rearranged, a nasty bump. I think it was Armageddon, the Hardys versus Eminem. Yeah, that was a nasty bump. That was the area where, of course, Jeff Hardy had recently come back. So it was safe to say, despite his immense popularity at the time, he was super popular. Of course, he had some programs with Umaga then as well. I think the company started to pick up on his popularity and his inevitable route towards being the front man in whatever show he's going to be on, Raw or SmackDown. So come the fall of 2008, he gets interjected into this match where he's going head-to-head with Triple H and Edge in a triple threat match. Now, no one, I'll be honest with you, like a few months ago, no one would have seen this coming. But he drops that Swanton Bomb 1, 2, 3, and instantly that crowd erupts, and Jeff Hardy's your new WWE champion. Now, this was such a groundbreaking moment because, like I said in the past, we've had people win championships out of the blue where you feel like, hold on a minute, might be a placeholder champion. When Jeff won it, the only thing that was going to stop him was the WWE's booking. But even back then, they couldn't deny him. He was so popular in 2008. You know, the common saying everyone says, every wrestling fan knows. In the year 2008, Jeff Hardy was more popular than Obama himself at the time. This brother here was giving us MJ, Michael Jackson-like vibes in terms of how crazy fans used to go for him. I remember one of my neighbors at the time, he was a good friend of mine around my age, and he was obsessed with Jeff Hardy. You know, I was a massive fan of Jeff, but this guy, I remember he would, like, sometimes he'd come out, you know, ride bikes, and he would get socks and he would like cut socks to mimic the armbands that Jeff used to wear, so he could do his little, you know. So seeing him win this title was so damn good, and this was his glow up moment. Fast forward, although he lost the championship, he again won the World Heavyweight Championship, and he went into that amazing feud with CM Punk on SmackDown. Honestly, that was so good, and every single time Jeff Hardy came out, like, the pops were just... This is probably not even a hot take, because I'm sure someone else has said it as well, but people always contemplated what would have happened if Jeff Hardy went all in and he did not leave the WWE in late 2009, continued as the man on SmackDown whilst I believe it was Cena on Raw. What would have happened? Because would we have got Jeff Hardy overtaking Cena's spot? There was potential. Like, Jeff was not getting booed at all. Like, Cena got cheered and booed, of course, as we know. Jeff was just a resounding, unanimous cheer every single time. Like, you know, people were cheering in unison, men, children, and women. So it's definitely one of the biggest what ifs in WWE history. And although he's still extremely popular, he has been ever since, he's never been to the same level of 08-09 Jeff Hardy, where he was really being pushed to be the man. Of course, he had a couple of personal problems in his life as well. His showing in 2011, namely in TNA when he restarted wrestling, the performance with Sting, as we know, where he came out, like, I think boozed up and everything like that, wasn't a good look for him. And fast forward, I mean, you know, even till today, shout out to the Hardys, the tag champs, multiple tag champs, still running strong. And I'm just happy, I'm honestly, genuinely happy to see Jeff still doing his thing. He's in a good place, you know, he's overcome many things in his life. But this was the glow up, going from a tag team guy where we always knew Jeff was popular, like, audience always loved it, even back in his Team Extreme days, but we never felt like, at least I didn't, the company is gonna make him the guy. You know, that, never thought that. So when they did in the late 2000s, it was like, okay, here we go. Those 2 years we got with Jeff, you know, being the world champ and WWE champ and being the main man, it was a sight to see. And you know, go back and watch it on YouTube, and you'll honestly see, like, you know what, we caught lightning in a bottle just for like a short period, and honestly, what a beautiful time it was. Next up, we've got the rated R superstar Edge. Now, similar to Jeff Hardy, Edge was also a perennial tag team player, right? He was all over the tag team game alongside his childhood friend Christian. Very much around the same time as the Hardys, of course, and the Dudleys. And although in like early 2000s, he was part of the great SmackDown 6, and he got that sort of solo spotlight, you know, he could really show that, you know what, he can go. So that's definitely worth mentioning. However, he was still around the mid-card despite being in high-profile matches, high-profile feuds, and really at times being in the main event. It was very temporary, and it was never for him to finish upon, it was to provide that position to his opponent. So when we fast forward to WrestleMania 21, that was the one where they go Hollywood, the inaugural Money in the Bank. Edge becomes your winner, and we thought, okay, hold on a minute. We had no inkling of how the Money in the Bank briefcase will work. Of course, they told us the rules and everything like that. And Edge essentially ended up holding this briefcase, I want to say like 500 plus days, so like almost 18 months, which defies the laws of the Money in the Bank, at least in the modern day. I'm sure back then they probably didn't have that, but like now you have to cash in, of course, within a 12-month period. Back then, this boy ran around with that briefcase for a long time. And you know, he yoinked Matt Hardy's girl in real life, literally. Had a mad sex celebration with her when he finally became the WWE champion, and he cashed in on John Cena. This moment was pretty iconic. I think this was New Year's Revolution from my recollection. Again, I was watching wrestling vividly at this time, so I can vividly remember. And with this, we did not know what to make of it. Is this just because he's become Money in the Bank briefcase holder? Is he gonna eventually lose it, go back down to the mid-card? No. This was Edge coming out to be, hey, I am one of the top dogs and I am staying here. His feud with John Cena was one of the best feuds of the 2000s. And I would argue This raised the stock of John Cena, who already was the man, like certified, he was the man at the time. I think this just gave more profile to John Cena. And Edge was the perfect antithesis to John Cena. Character-wise, wrestling style-wise, in every sense, he was the complete opposition, the opposite of what John Cena is, and it worked so perfectly. I was in high school at the time. For you Americans, I believe that's elementary school. And I remember despising Edge's guts, like to the point where me and my friends at school honestly used to just talk shit about him, like used to hate him. Like, you know, he pulled this hot bird and Lita, like back then, you know, we all fancied the shit out of Lita. She was like everyone's, her or Trish were like your first bits of crushes. Like, those ladies helped us get through puberty in the early 2000s. So shout out to both of them. And they're also very talented in the ring as well, of course. But Edge took the hot girl. He took the championship off the babyface. He did it in such a snarky, sneaky way. Everything about him just screamed like, oh, you prick. Like he was a certified prick. And emphasized the P in that. But then he would cash in again, this time on SmackDown, during the programs between Batista and The Undertaker. And wow, this was some of Edge's, well, I mean, his work with John Cena was top tier. But I think I really enjoyed the work he did with The Undertaker and Batista on SmackDown, where you had this trio that I just mentioned who were like the main event scene from like 07 to like 08, 09-ish, I think. And this was big, this was really big. So much so where at WrestleMania 24, from our understanding today, Edge was groomed to be the individual to end the streak. He said no. And despite that, they went in, The Undertaker and Edge went in to a series of top tier matches. They had a crazy Hell in a Cell match. I think it was Survivor Series. Of course, the WrestleMania 24 match that I mentioned was such a good WrestleMania match where we genuinely thought the streak's gonna be over. It was such a good in-ring bout as well. Like Styles matched Takers and Edges so well too. So this was the peak and ultimately the glow up of Edge from 06 all the way really till 2011. And to think this dude won 11 world championships in 5 years from 2006 to 2011. That is incredible. Sadly, he had to retire very early in 2011 where he went out as world champion. Fast forward, in my eyes, the greatest return of all time. Yes, even more than CM Punk, I'm sorry to say it, but that moment in 2020's Royal Rumble, Edge's music hit, like my jaw was on the floor. And me and my friend just went nuts. Like this was such a heavy moment because we thought Edge, you know, we knew he couldn't come back because of a neck injury, and he was stopped in his prime. Like he was in his 30s at the time, you know, he wasn't nowhere near as old. And as we know, late 30s, early 40s, that's prime time for wrestlers, and he got that taken away from him. So when he came back, automatically into the main event scene, and although he didn't become world champion again, he was always in high profile matches in the WWE, and of course now he's doing some great work in AEW. So ever since that stint in 2006, he's been up there and he stayed up there. Lastly, it's time for the wild card, number 4. I went with this individual as opposed to the likes of your Roman Reigns, Cody Rhodes, Drew McIntyre, who I all gave honorable mentions to at the start of the video. This individual is current on the roster right now, on the WWE roster. And I just feel like he hasn't been talked about as much as your other glow-ups. The names that I mentioned, including the honorable mentions. And that is, I mean, he's got many nicknames. His most prominent one, of course, is Bisexual Undertaker, Damian Priest. And I've got to give a shout out to him and include him in this list. Now, anyone who hasn't seen, you know, go back and watch his documentary. I was going to say on the WWE network, but that's a relic of the past, sadly. Go on Netflix, you'll see it there. Damian Priest was raised in the hood, the ghetto, I think it was New York. And this man went through so many ups and downs in his personal life. Sleeping in cars, not having enough money, trying to go to indie shows but not working out. He gained a lot of weight, and not the good way. He gained a lot of fat at one point. And he said himself like he was at his lowest point. So when he finally debuted in the WWE, specifically NXT in 2018, by this point Damian Priest was already 35 years old. Now, by all means, like I mentioned earlier, I think wrestling prime for superstars is between like the late 30s, or sorry, mid 30s up until like the early 40s. But that's for people that have already cemented their names, you know, they've got a backlog, you know, like whether it's like Jeff Hardy I mentioned, before he hit his prime in his 30s or whatever, he was still in his 20s known as a major tag team player. Same with Edge, same with CM Punk in the indies. Damian Priest, it was very much different. And of course, yeah, he's done some work outside of the indies as well, but never to the magnitude of, like, let's say a CM Punk or Kevin Owens or Sami Zayn. But he did well. Our boy did well in NXT in 2018. He became a North American champion and eventually got called up to the main roster in 2020. He had a solid showing in the 2021 Royal Rumble. I think he eliminated Kane, if I can recall. They brought back Kane for that Rumble. But despite all this, he was still very much heavy in the mid-card. Like, he took up space in the mid-card. He won the US Championship as well in 2022. Then we fast forward to the moment of his glow up. This is the early stages of him. We never knew how big it would get, but we transition into WrestleMania. Edge and AJ Styles. Fast forward, you have the birth, the initial incarnation of the Judgment Day with Edge, Rhea Ripley, and Damian Priest. This is just before Finn Balor enters the equation and they take out Edge. Damian Priest was taken under the wing of the rated R superstar Edge, who for some damn reason cut his hair. I still don't know why Edge cut his hair. There's some individuals in wrestling where short hair suits them. I think CM Punk looks way better with short hair than he does with long hair. Edge, I mean, that boy had the iconic look with the hair where he can pull it when he's doing his spear. Now he's just got this weird teenage sort of haircut. Anywho, Damian Priest was positioned in this Judgment Day group as almost like a heavy, but it seemed like Edge was grooming him, on his way out, perhaps in a couple of years. Here's the mantra, here's the torch, being passed on to Damian Priest. And as we move forward, we've now got a whole new Judgment Day. I'm talking about prime OG Judgment Day. Once Edge has been kicked out, Rhea Ripley, Damian Priest, Finn Balor. Of course, soon after you get Dirty Dom get involved. That OG Judgment Day group actually worked. It was very corny initially. I mean, the name still is very, very corny and cheesy. Like, imagine you've got a couple of mates and you're like, who don't watch wrestling. You want to introduce them to wrestling. You stick on the television and you're like, hey, look, listen, check out the Bloodline. They're like, why are they called the Bloodline? You give them the backstory. Makes sense. Okay, cool, yeah, nice. What about these guys? Oh yeah, they come out in gothic outfits and stuff, and they call themselves the Judgment Day. And it's like, us wrestling fans, we're not beating the allegations or being kind of weird. But anyways, they did a really good job. That OG Judgment Day formation was so good. And I saw the launch of so many superstars. Like, we're talking about Damian Priest right now, which I'll get into his actual high point, his glow up moment in just a second, which came whilst being in the Judgment Day. But we can really look at a couple of other stars like Dominic Mysterio. Where is he right now? It's all because of his inclusion in the Judgment Day and him turning on his deadbeat dad. And then you got Rhea Ripley, who's arguably the biggest superstar, male or female right now. When she comes out, like, it is an eruption, all from her time as being mommy, in the Judgment Day. The same can be said about the man in question here, Damian Priest. His biggest glow up came in the Judgment Day, because ever since he was in that group, honestly, I really started taking him a bit more seriously. He found his footing. And at times it felt like he was kind of like the dad of the group, like he kind of was the leader in a sense. And then in 2023, out of nowhere, although we all thought it was in the LA Knight, Damian Priest wins the Money in the Bank briefcase. Fast forward, cashes it in at WrestleMania 40 against the only other man, well, during the match, of the only other man who's cashed in at WrestleMania being Seth Rollins. And he costs Drew McIntyre the championship and becomes World Heavyweight Champion. Now this reign, again, I'll use the similar words I've used before in this video. Is this going to be a championship reign of Damian Priest where it's like, we're going to give you the championship just to like change things up in the product? Initially, it may have felt like that, but I'm going to be honest with you, this championship grew on me so well, where by the time we got into SummerSlam, I was like behind Damian Priest. Like, I really enjoyed his work. It wasn't a very long reign. It was literally from Mania to SummerSlam, where he ultimately lost it to Gunther. But this man's booking during that reign was solid, where even Gunther didn't beat him clean. You had Finn Balor come out, cost Damian Priest, where they then turned to Damian Priest face, and it made sense because the company probably saw, hey, you know what? this man's catching steam. Like, he is gaining momentum. He's doing some of his best work. Screw it. Let's get him out of the Judgment Day. Let's make him a sympathetic babyface. It worked. It really worked. So although he lost the championship, I'll be honest, since then, this man has been booked. This man does rarely, you know, this man seldom loses, even till today. Like, he would pick up these random wins and you're like, how? Why? Of course, he's deserving of it, but this guy is booked very, very strong. So to think, you know, this glow up, the reason why I kept this sort of glow up towards the end of the video is because it was the one where no one saw this one coming, you know. Like I said, with your CM Punks, your Jeff Hardys, your Edges, there was still talks in you know, corners and groups like, oh man, yeah, you know, these lot got a long history, they're super over for whatever reason. You know, CM Punk stands out, says what he wants to even before his 2011 peak. Jeff Hardy being the daredevil who everyone absolutely adores and they want to see him go further. But with Damian Priest, we didn't have any of that. We really didn't have any of that. You know, for those fans who don't watch NXT, they first got introduced to Damian Priest in 2020 during the lockdown pandemic era, which was not a hot era other than what Roman Reigns and Jey Uso were doing, and a bit of Drew McIntyre. There was nothing hot on TV. Damian Priest was just there, you know. So for him to come out and then all of a sudden make a statement in the Judgment Day, find his footing, become very comfortable, then win the Money in the Bank and cash in at WrestleMania, being the only other second superstar in history to do that, having a solid reign, and since then he does get a good reaction with the crowd, and he's been in many matches where it's like sometimes he feels like the odd one out. Was it the Elimination Chamber this year? I'm sure it was, yeah. Like, he was the only one where it felt a bit like, you know, out of place, but that's a testament to the work he's done and how much of this glow up has actually worked for him, ultimately giving him, I think, infinite solid booking, where he's now cemented himself into the main event scene. Do I see him become world champion again? Probably not, but I would be doing a chronic injustice if I did not include this man in this list, because this is truly the epitome and definition of a glow up. I'm 1000% sure I probably missed some other ones, but I wanted to make this video, well, I wanted to make it compact. I don't think it's going to be compact. Apologies for that. And I will be honest, I had at number 4 and 5, Cody Rhodes and Drew McIntyre. I just took them out of the equation because there's been enough said on them and their glow ups, which are huge, and it's been said enough. I wanted to place the spotlight on somebody else, and that was Damian Priest. Putting Damian Priest into a list with like Edge, CM Punk and Jeff Hardy at that main event scene, it's for sure contrast, and that's exactly why I wanted to do it. But anyways, that's everything from my end, guys. I would love to hear your opinion down below in the comments, and if there's anyone's glow up that you really resonated with as well, sound off, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.